Glad that you could join me again. Hope that you've been having a good week so far. Tonight's message I've entitled Discovering Your Identity. Discovering Your Identity. We should look to forge our own path in life, blaze our own trail, not ride on the coattails of another. Have you ever heard that expression? To ride on the coattails of another, or hang on to someone else's coattails. It means to benefit from someone else's success, to use someone else's success as a means to achieve one's own. There are several connotations to the word coattail. It can also mean to be aided by association with another person. Making connections and building relationships is a key part in the line of work that I do. It's a big world filled with lots of people to meet and get to know, and people can be a big help to us. You've probably heard about the value of making strong connections, like I have with the cliche. It's not what you know, but who you know. Many subscribe to this cliche as a position and belief for upward mobility, either on the job or in business or just for a hookup. People can be a big help to us. One connection can lead to another, which can open up further opportunities to achieve one's goals. However, there is also the possibility that people can become a hindrance and can cause us harm. There's a real need for us to be mindful of where we're at in life. Are there any coattails that we've been hanging on to? It can begin subtly with admiration. You begin admiring a person and their work and their accomplishments. And then it can lead to envying that person, even wanting to be just like them, wanting their life for your own. And then before you know it, you want to dress like them and then talk like them and act like them, to go to the same places and the same events, to have the same associations and be a part of the same groups. A supervisor once told his employees to be careful not to ride someone else's coattails, because when they went down, you would too. Whether in our personal lives or publicly, we can all think of examples of coattail riders who plummeted when their ride stopped. Riding coattails doesn't work in the end. One writer wrote, "The trouble with coattails is that they're hard to hold on to. Sooner or later, the wearer of the said coat will either see you riding along and flick you off, or they'll take a sharp turn when you aren't expecting, and you will inevitably lose your grip and fall off, face down, probably into a muddy puddle in the rain." It sounds like this writer has had personal experience with the downside of coat riding, or perhaps personally seen it happen to another. She has been annoyed by those who just want a free ride, freeloading without the work and efforts it takes to reach those goals. And her advice is this: don't keep trying to ride on coattails. Get your own coat. That's good advice. I like that. She also goes on to say, don't expect an overnight success. Most overnight success stories were years in the making. Know where you want to end up, then put the effort in. And the writer goes on to say that pretty much every opportunity that she has ever had come at the result of networking, delivering good work and content, service, and consistency. And she's pretty sure that everyone who ever recommended her for a job or introduced her to a useful contact had a good idea of who she was and what she was about first. And that's what we're looking at in this message, is discovering our identity and becoming who we want to be. The writer says that opportunities are out there, but you can't reach the summit without prepping for the climb. You see, networking is important and contacts are important. You know, as Christians, it's important for us to be out there and involved in the community. You know, our mission statement there at Stony Hill Baptist Church is building community by being the church. And so a lot of times it's that networking, it's making those relationships. You know, Jesus in the Great Commission that he gave us said, as you go and make disciples. As you go, as you're doing your networking, as you're involved in the community, as you go, make disciples, teaching them what I have taught you. The Great Commission for us to go, to be involved, to make those relationships, to network, to make those connections. And by doing so, I believe we begin to discover our identity and shape our identity, to find out who we are. Oh, networking is so important. Contacts are important. But more important than that is the right networks, the right contacts and associations. Having the right people in your life that will help lift you up and not tear you down. And that takes work to discover those relationships and to grow together, to find those people who share similar values and a vision, who inspire you to take the right steps, who motivate you to become your best self, who lead by example. You know, part of discovering your identity is to know what you value, what your convictions are, where do you stand, what values do you hold dear. And it's to set your sails in the direction that you want to go, to find your true north and move towards it, to nourish and to cherish and listen to that inner voice, and then open your mouth and find your voice. There's someone I admire and I look up to. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that he came to the conclusion that there's an existential moment in your life when you must decide to speak for yourself, that nobody else can speak for you. He was talking about discovering your identity, to find your own voice, that nobody else can speak for you. You must find it for yourself. You see, when we utilize the freedom to discover our identity, we can see it was helped, shaped by people, influences, and choices. And you know, we're still being shaped today. Every day you can be shaped by the people that you encounter. You can have an influence on them, and they can also have an influence on you. Each day we have a choice to choose what we're going to do in that day, who we're going to be around, what impact are we going to have. And this all shapes our identity. We were able to discover it in the process. Dear friend, who and what is shaping you? In Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 24, it says, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Did you catch that? Moses, by faith, was maturing, and he made a decision, a conscious decision, of where he was going to stand, of what he wanted to become. Moses, as he matured, began to see things differently. Dear friend, do you know, as Christians, we are to be maturing? We are to be growing in our relationship with God and others. We too are to be seeing differently. See, Moses was maturing, and part of that maturing process was that he began to see differently. In Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, it says, one day after Moses had grown up, after he was being matured, after he had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. Martin Luther King Jr. also said, an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. We see Moses, as he matured, he began to see differently. See, Moses was discovering his identity. And part of discovering our identity is finding a sense of belonging. All this is a process. The Bible says it is the work of faith. Notice again, if you will, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24, it says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Moses' refusal to ride on the coattails of another and to blaze his own trail was the work of faith in his life. He began to see differently by faith. He began to act differently by faith. And he began to make choices by faith. And so he began his walk in separation to discover his identity by faith and towards belonging. He began to see his own people. He saw where he belonged. In Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, it says that he went out to where his people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. Again, that quote by Martin Luther King Jr., an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. You see, part of our identity and maturity is losing the selfishness. Losing selfishness. That self-centeredness. Instead of being egocentric, we're more focused on the broader concerns of all humanity. Part of our identity and maturing is losing selfishness. It's discovering that it's not all about you. You know, in our me-centered, inwardly focused culture these days, it seems that we forget that. Like it or not, we're all in this together. It's unfortunate that so many, even in the church, have missed this vital step towards maturity and towards a new outlook on life. Remember, it's a work of faith that by faith we take this step. In Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, it says, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Moses began to look more deeply, you see. He began to look more deeply. Instead of just looking at the crowd, he began to focus in. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And Moses began to empathize. He began to personalize it. He identified. And then Moses took another step towards discovering his identity. That whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly, said Martin Luther King Jr. You see, Moses was indirectly affected by watching one of his own people being beaten. This aroused some deep-seated emotion in Moses. Some newly discovered emotion in himself began to rise up. He didn't like what he saw. It bothered him. It angered him. And he wanted to put an end to it all. An end to that injustice that he saw of his own people being beaten. And so he acted upon that feeling of anger with swift action. Moses was affected by the violence being done, and he thought that violence is the way to address the problem. He chose to fight violence with violence. Moses' desire to end the violence was right, but his resorting to violence infused more violence to the situation, and that was not right. It created a ripple effect. You see, the truth is that our actions have consequences. In every interaction that we have, we either make things better or worse. Too often we choose what serves us best without considering the short or long-term implications. We should factor in the impact of our thoughts and words and actions rather than functioning on autopilot all the time. Which means sometimes we have to do the right thing even when it's hard. And by doing so, we are discovering and shaping our identity. Dear friends, I hope that each day we are we're making these choices to better shape our identity. That we have this goal in mind and we continue to move further and further towards that goal. It's by faith that we do these things. I pray that we are surrounded by good influences that will challenge us, that will motivate us, that will inspire us. And I pray that you have some of those people that's in your circle, those who strengthen you. They help lift you up, they support you. And that you have some of the similar values and vision to further you along there as you make some of these decisions and choices each day. That they'll motivate you, that they'll be in your corner and encourage you, and that you lift each other up. I pray that we have those support groups there in our circle. I pray that you're being supported and you continue to grow there, you continue to mature. I hope this message has been a blessing to you. Thanks for tuning in once again. And God bless you. Until next time, bye-bye.